Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So I'm out here today to celebrate a little bit because I'm a good friend, and I don't know if you're a good friend too, but there is a birthday that has just happened, and I'm not sure if you remembered it. So I'm talking about the birthday for this little guy right here. This is Nikon's 300 PF lens, which was released as of January 10 years ago. So this little guy is 10 years old. And so what I thought I would do today is bring it out, talk about it a little bit, and ask the question, is the 300 PF still a viable lens today in 2025 for bird and wildlife photography? And I think it's an interesting question. I will say I am a little biased because I have taken some of my favorite photos that I've ever taken with the 300 PF. So let's go out on a little bit of a nature walk and talk about it and answer that question. Is the 300 PF a viable lens for bird and wildlife photography today? Let's get to it. Okay, so I know I'm supposed to save the answer to the big question for the end of the video, but I'm going to go ahead and unfortunately spoil it right now. The answer is yes. I think the 300 PF is still a viable option for bird and wildlife photography in 2025, and I'm going to spin this video giving you a few reasons why, starting with how lightweight and portable it is. So this was Nikon's very first lens, featuring a PF, or a phase Fresnel lens. This lens element is a special magical technology used in other things like microscopes and lighthouses to allow a lot of focal length to be packed into a small and lightweight lens. And it's pretty incredible. Since they've released this lens, they've also released the 500 PF, the 600 PF, and the 800 PF, and they are all fantastic and lightweight lenses. But it all started with this one right here, which is still 10 years later, Nikon's lightest ever 300mm lens. And it is incredibly portable. So I like to take this thing out on hikes when weight is important to me and I need to shave off every pound possible. Because again, you're getting 300mm with just basically this weightless lens. And I love to pair it with the Nikon Z8, and I think there isn't another viable full frame combination out there that is so portable and lightweight for a hike. And with the Z8 and the 45 megapixel sensor, cropping that in to DX mode, you're getting an effective focal length of 450 mil for, like the weight is incredible. I'll put it down on the screen, but it's almost nothing. So I think for lightweight and portability features alone, this lens is viable, but there are more reasons to talk about. Before we get into the next reason, here are the specs for the lens. Feel free to pause if you want to take a look in more detail. So another thing that makes this lens incredibly viable for wildlife and bird photography in 2025 is the maximum aperture of f4. Normally, if you're going to get an f2.8 or an f4 in a prime, it's going to be one of these expensive primes like the 600 or the 400 that costs $15,000. But for a little over $1,000 used right now in 2025, you can get that maximum aperture of f4. And I think as I look back at the photos that I've taken over the years with this lens, the theme that keeps popping out time and time again has been how well this lens just blows out the background and just makes this nice, smooth, minimal photo with a creamy bokeh. And it's just, I think the charm of this lens is that clean f4 background. And I think along those same lines, that maximum aperture allows for shooting in much lower light situations. And so when it's kind of sunrise, sunset, really dark, and I need to double the amount of available light, I'm going to bring this lens out and shoot it in DX mode. The only downside to the lens really is the 300 mil being a little short for small birds. But if you're shooting mammals, larger birds, or you can get close to your subject, you really just can't beat this lens. So another aspect of this lens that I find to be pretty remarkable is the minimum focus distance. I mean, compared to some of the Z series lenses that I've shot with, like the 400 4.5, the minimum focus distance is great. I can't remember the exact number in feet, but I will put it on the screen here. But it really is remarkable. And in fact, I prefer this lens over the macro lens I have for shooting macro-esque subjects, because with the 105, you gotta get really close to your subject, and you got that razor thin depth of field, and it makes macro kind of tough. But with this, I can actually put some distance between the subject and myself and still get that up close and personal macro look. And in many cases, I just prefer the experience of using this for macro over an actual macro lens. So that's a huge point for me in favor of the versatility and viability of this lens. So 3 points for the 300. Happy birthday, buddy. So the last thing I want to say about this lens is that even 10 years later, and even with this being an F-mount lens, the sharpness and contrast of this lens are remarkable. I really think this thing punches above its weight and keeps up with the Z series glass of today. Now, I compared this to the 400 4.5. I'm going to make a whole separate video showing some of the comparisons, but I'll spoil it a little bit right now. I shot some test charts and I just did some side-by-side comparisons of these two lenses, because the 400 4.5 is one of the sharpest lenses I have ever owned, and I wanted to see how this 10-year-old F-mount glass would compare, and they were actually pretty close. When looking at 100%, when shot wide open, really the center sharpness, you couldn't tell the difference. And really there was some vignetting and a little lack of sharpness around the edges on the 300 PF, which might actually give it some of its charm. But as soon as you stop down the lens to f8, both of the lenses, again, incredibly sharp. I cannot tell the difference at 100%. And it wasn't until I zoomed into 200% that I could start to tell the difference, and that the 400 4.5 really came out as the superior and sharper lens. But that goes to show you that this lens is pretty incredible, that it's keeping up with the best glass of the Z series even to this day. And again, I have shot some of my favorite photos of all time with this lens, and I was always impressed with the detail and the quality of the sharpness and the impressive fade from the sharp foreground to the gentle fade to the out of focus background. I just think looks incredible with this lens. So I think what I'll do to put my money where my mouth is here is show you some of my favorite photos that I've taken with this lens and just prove out that it really, really is a viable option even today for photography in 2025. And by the way, these photos were taken with the Z8 and the Z9, so modern 45 megapixel sensors, and they still look incredible. So happy birthday 300 PF. Let's cut to the slideshow, and hey, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.